Crusaders who ruled the land of Israel during the 11th to 13th century CE have certainly left their footprint on the Holy Land, with some of the most outstanding sites such as the ones found in the city of Akko. But one of the most impressive sites from the Crusaders' time is less known. Welcome to the Belvoir Fortress.
This is Belvoir. It's one of my favorite sites in Israel because it's a very preserved, beautifully preserved Crusader castle. It's actually two castles. There's one in the middle and one on the outside. And this was built in the middle of the 12th century, about 60 years after the Crusaders conquered the Holy Land. We're sitting on the top of the Jordan Valley Rift. It's a very strategic site. So the Hospitallers were able to buy this place and turn it into a formidable fortress.
Just like the nearby city of Beit Shan, the Belvoir Fortress is situated at a major strategic point, which made it a prime location for this magnificent fortress.
We're sitting here on this beautiful ridge overlooking the Jordan Valley, the Jordan Rift. It's a Syrian-African rift. It's a very, very wide and deep rift in the earth. And as you can see, we are about 200 meters above sea level, which is about 500 meters above the Jordan River, which is down in the bottom there. So it's a very high ridge that goes up here. It's a very strategic point. So anybody that wants to come from Jordan into the Holy Land has to pass along this valley. So the Crusaders knew that they had to have a fortress here to keep an eye on the eastern edge of the Crusader kingdom. And that's why they built Belvoir.
The original structure was built in the 11th century by a nobleman named Velos, who lived in the city of Tiberias on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. He later sold the fortress to the Knights Hospitaller.
During the Crusader period, we had various types of orders of knights. We had the Templar Knights, the Teutonic Knights, the Lazarus Knights, and the Hospitallers. Now, the Hospitallers, they're the ones who took care of the pilgrims. They healed them. That's why the word hospital comes from that word. And then they bought this land out in the middle of the 12th century, and they built this formidable fortress. Now, they believed in piousness, and obstinance, and obedience. It's kind of a fundamentalistic cult in a way, and they're the ones who felt that they were the ones. They had to protect the Holy Land from the infidels.
During the first decade, the fortress did not come under attack. The Crusaders called it Belvoir, or Beautiful View in French, resembling not just the stunning view, but the well-established structure of the compound.
The Crusaders brought with them a distinctive architectural style from Western Europe, but they changed it because of some of the limitations they had here in the Holy Land. For example, you see we have an arch. It's not a round arch, but a kind of a pointed arch. That's what is a local custom because they didn't need to have the frames made out of wood to build that. But you see also the two different color stones. This is the hard basalt stone, which they used to put on the bottom when the soldiers were coming. They wouldn't be able to break it through. And the softer limestone was on the top. That was much easier to work with, and they liked to work with that whenever they could, but away from the hands of the invading forces. So that's usually the top of the arches.
The Crusaders used various methods to avoid invasions.
So we are inside one of the corner towers, and what the Crusaders did was they built this sort of secret passageway down to the bottom of the moat, and squads would go out at nighttime, attack the infidels, and then come back in and scurry back up the tower through this secret entrance.
In 1187, Arab forces led by Salah ad-Din defeated the Crusaders in the famous Battle of Hattin. Only 3 fortresses of the Jerusalem kingdom didn't fall to Salah ad-Din. One of them was Belvoir Fortress.
Salah ad-Din has put together a formidable Muslim army to come take the Holy Land back from the Crusaders. And he comes to Belvoir, and he tries to capture it, but he's not successful because of the massive defense of 2 walls of defense, and he pulls away. About 5 years later, he puts together another army, and he meets the Crusaders in the Battle of Horns of Hattin. He defeats them, and he captures Jerusalem, he captures Akko, and he captures all the Crusader kingdom, except for with one holdout here, the Belvoir holdout, and the one in Safed. A few months later, the one in Safed falls. He comes here, he besieges this place for a year and a half, but they're holding out. They're very strong. They have water. They have defenses. So what does these soldiers do? There was a big tower behind me. They build a fire underneath it, and it collapses. So after it collapses, the Crusaders are saying, you know what, we can hold out, but why? We're the last Crusaders in the Holy Land. They're going to surrender, and they surrendered. And Salah ad-Din accepted their surrender, and they marched them off to Tyre.
In terms of architecture and archaeology, this is one of the most well-preserved and completed fortresses in the region. The reason for that is a combination of the unique topography of the area and the historical consequence which led to its fine preservation.
We're standing inside the middle of the courtyard of the keep, the main castle, the central castle, and this is where the daily life of the knights would place. So here we have a laundry, over there is the kitchen, over there is the church, at the top was the commander's house, and after Salah ad-Din took over and the Crusaders were banished from here, his successor said, I don't want those Crusaders coming back. So what he did was send his forces to the castle and destroyed it. But what did they do? They went to the second floor and they toppled it onto the first floor. And it was like that for 800 years until archaeologists came by and they said they just picked up the pieces and it's been all this preserved castle right here.
In 1219, the fortress was abandoned. But in the years following, the place, which is now called Kochav HaYarden, or Star of the Jordan, was a center of many other famous battles and disputes.
In 1936, this is one of the places where the Arabs had a revolt against the British, and they would be based here because they would attack the British forces in the pipeline and went to Haifa. And Ord Wingate would organize the Special Night Squads, and they would come and attack, and there were battles here. 1948, the Golani Brigade came here and took over Beit Sha'an, and then they took over Kochav HaYarden, and it's been in Israel's hands ever since.
Far from the main tourist attractions, the Belvoir Fortress is still a great reminder of long-gone glorious kingdoms, battles, and a lavish lifestyle in the Holy Land.